Jeff.
All right. Jeff Wald, very excited to talk to you today. We're talking in the pregame. I'm like, this guy is kind of perfect. Wait till you hear everything about him. I'm excited to get into it. Selfish reasons today why I wanted to talk to him, because he's got so much there. He's a Harvard grad, Cornell, you got the pedigree, you got all the businesses. And I said, Jeff, do you have a long shot story? He's like, oh yeah, I got one. But we're going to get into that. But I like to go back to the beginning.
Let's go back to the beginning.
Where you from? What did your parents do? Where you grew up?
So I grew up in a town called Port Washington out in Long Island, just a suburb of New York City. It is, Michael, it's like a Norman Rockwell painting. I mean, unbelievably fortunate to grow up there, suburbia USA. My father was a dentist. My mother was a high school calculus professor. She, prior to having children, was a college calculus professor, but Dial took some time off and then just went back and taught advanced calc at high schools. And just grew up in an absolutely loving family and an idyllic childhood. I have nothing but wonderful things to say about the unbelievably fortunate start I was given.
Brothers, sisters, anybody, any kids?
Older brother, younger brother. So everything middle child, it's all right here. It's all right
Really?
there.
So you're supposed to be the problem one, but that didn't happen, or were you?
It's interesting. I think about the middle child a lot because both my brothers have three kids. And when I go and visit them, I spend a lot of time with the oldest because the oldest is the most sentient. We can have the deepest conversations. I spend a lot of time with the youngest because the youngest is most adorable still because they're still young. And then in the middle, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot to even talk to the middle kid. As I'm leaving, I'm like, oh, I forgot there's another kid. So I think the middle child gets left out a lot. So they have to either act out or overachieve. And I opted for the overachievement part.
Awesome. Okay, so your parents are smart. Were you always good in school?
I was.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Just,
well, that's
yeah.
good. So no, let me ask you a question, because I want to get in the mind of you, because I see we're going to get into the achievements, and I want to know what makes you tick. I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I grew up with the ADHD, so I want to find out, more. So when you were 9 or 10 years old, this is a typical question. It sets me a trajectory of your life and everything. So what would you say was one of your major emotional wants? You had a great life. Your parents are smart. You're doing well in school, but there's always like a primary emotional want that we have at that time. What do you think yours was?
Well, I'm going to harken back to what teachers would say, which is, if 100 kids were doing something one way, Jeff would just do it the other way just to be different. And so I had this pathological need or deep-seated need to be noticed and to be different. And I would say that that's still a thread that I would say haunts me today because I don't think it's a good quality.
I beg to differ. We're going to get into that. So I'm a fan of that. I like that a lot. Okay. So how you went to, where'd you go first? Where'd you go to college first?
I did a 5-year combined undergrad and grad program at Cornell University. My
Okay.
dad found out that Cornell, because we lived in New York State, that if you went to a certain part of Cornell, the tuition was, I think, a third of what a normal uh, college would cost. And so he found that out. He said, "So you'll be going to Cornell University," and
Smart.
that was
Yeah.
the end of that.
That makes sense. So what'd you study there?
Economics, and with a minor in psychology and Japanese studies.
Cool. Japanese. That's not an easy
Yep.
language from what I understand.
It's not, which is why I retain virtually none of it to today. Got
Okay.
nothing.
So then after Cornell, did you jump right into Harvard?
I actually went to JP Morgan and was an M&A banker with JP for 5 years before I went off to business school at Harvard.
Wow. So you got involved in the workforce, and you said, I'm going to go back. And what was the mechanics of that? Why'd you say, I want to go back? What'd you go back for to Harvard? Education, or what was it?
No, actually, it wasn't the education. I only applied to the one business school because the brand was so important. And I remember talking to a very senior investment banker. He's like, "Why did you apply to business school? I don't understand." I said, "Look, I didn't apply to business school. I applied to Harvard. If I got into Harvard, I would go, but I wasn't going to go to any other business school." it was, given where my career was at that point, it wasn't worth it for me to go to any school, but it
Right.
was worth it for me to go to that school because of the power of that brand and the power of that network that it brings you was more than worth the 2 years of time off.
Did you find what was worth more? Was it the brand or the network? Because the brand, who are you going to show that to? Or was it the network of people that you got to know and then, utilize and network with on the line and business deals or, opportunities?
I'm going to say network because it impacted my life not just from a business standpoint, but these are my closest friends now.
Right.
I had a conversation with a buddy of mine from Cornell. He's like, "Oh my God, we haven't seen each other in so long. We hadn't spoken in like 20 years." And he said, "Why don't you still stay in touch with the guys from the fraternity house and whatever?" And I said, "Well, look, I had another stop in my journey, and in that stop, I was a more sentient person, right? I was more myself. I wasn't some, anxious and insecure kid as I was in college. I was becoming an adult. Not that I don't still have insecurities." And so the people that got to know me in business school got to know more of the real me, and we were able to connect on a deeper level. And so those are the relationships that persisted. And it's not that I don't have a lot of affection for the people that I've met in the earlier parts of my journey. It's just we didn't develop that type of connection because we weren't really ourselves yet, at least
Right.
in my telling of it.